Hey folks, we're back with part 2 of our CSS Selectors Specificity lesson. So Professor K here, and I am going to tell you today about how pseudo-classes and nesting your selectors affects specificity using a real-world example. So let's take a quick look at what's happening here. All right, so here I've actually put together a small example in Popcode of a really basic admissions page for BU. And it might have a main navigation, just like this, and it might have a side navigation like this. So you can see in my HTML, I've got nav class of main navigation up here, and then I have nav class of side navigation down here. Just to kind of break down how this layout is working, we're going to hide the HTML for a moment. And two kind of big pieces I've added to make this happen are content. This is my content. Is floated left, and it has a width of 66%. My side navigation right here is also floated left. You could also float it right. Watch how it changes the thing. It'll just be more towards the side, and a width of 33%. This entire container is 100%. So the reason why that works is because those add up to less than 100%. If I were to go and I was to change this to 35%, this would end up all the way at the bottom. And the reason why is because there's not enough space for it to fit. So just doing some rough math, this obviously isn't exact. 66 plus 33 equals 99, and that's close enough for me. So that's kind of what's going on with the layout here. And now we're going to get into actually writing some CSS to try and style our main navigation a little bit different from our side navigation. Let's take a look and see what we could do using different CSS selectors. So first of all, I want my links in the main navigation to be white, because obviously this is not very readable. So the broadest selector we could write here is an element selector, right? So let's try writing a color white. Easy peasy, right? Awesome. We've got it applying to our main navigation, but now our side navigation has disappeared. Not so great. So we need something more specific to just target this main navigation. And we know from our studies that the easiest way to do that is just to take a look and see, okay, what could we use in our HTML to make that selector more specific, to kind of contain these styles to just this area. So what do we have available to us? We have this nav class of main navigation. So what we could do is write .main navigation A, and then we're back in business. However, what if we wanted all of our hyperlinks inside of content? Let's just put in a little hyperlink here just to round things out. This is a hyperlink /A. So here we have a purple visited hyperlink. I'm just going to add something here so that we don't get that anymore. Here we have the blue. Here we have the blue over here. And we have the white up here. And what if we said, well, I want all my links in content. It would be really annoying to have to add a class to every single hyperlink in your HTML. You don't need to do that. This is the time for a really broad selector. So we could say all our hyperlinks, I want them to be hot pink, color hot pink. Perfect. Now these are applying everywhere except for in our main navigation because we have a more specific selector. And because it's more specific, even if we were to move this rule above the A, it would still apply. So here's specificity in action, right? How targeted do you want your rules to be? So what if we had our side navigation and we wanted to keep our rules kind of nice and close together? So we have side navigation UL, and then we want to have these links be a different color. Well, another thing that we could do is write a .side navigation, just like our main navigation, A, color, and then let's say we want these to be green, close that, and now these are green. We've got a good variety of link colors here. So one thing that we haven't talked about yet in terms of specificity is pseudo-classes. And remember that pseudo-classes are going to be those classes that are all based on like the interactivity or like some state of the element. So here we're going to style the hover state, a:hover. That's a pseudo class. And when we hover, I want there to be a color of red. So let's see how broadly this applies. What do you think will win? It applies everywhere. So let's take a look at our specificity calculator over here. This is a specificity of 0.1.1. However, if we have an A hover, this is a 0.1.1 as well. So equal specificity, and because this is further down, it applies everywhere. So here's the deal with specificity. If this is equal and this is equal, you move it around in the style sheet, this one will start to override. So now we don't have a hover on here, but we do have hovers over here. Realistically speaking, if we wanted to continue to override and we wanted the main navigation, that to have some sort of hover state too, we would have to copy that rule, paste it, and then add the hover class to override it. And we would override that, and let's say we're going to make the color blue when we hover. So now it's back to blue. Nobody else gets that when it hovers. So the reason why specificity is so important is because each level of specificity you introduce is one more level that you have to override. And every time you get more specific with your selector and then you want to override it for a different situation, then you just have to keep overriding and overriding. So here you can see this is 0.2.1. And again, I mean, this specificity calculator can help you, but word it through, read out this rule and think about where it applies. You don't need the numbers for specificity. You just need an understanding of how broadly or specifically this rule applies. So let's read it out, right? This rule is only going to apply to the main navigation class. And remember, classes can be everywhere, so it could be multiple elements in the HTML this is applying to. It's only going to apply to A tags, the A element inside of main navigation, and only the A tags that are being hovered over. So that's a lot of onlys in there, right? And the more specific you get, let's say .class, right? Some sort of class. This is no longer going to apply because there's no A's in here with a class of class, right? Let's do like demo here, just to be a little clearer. So in this rule, it would be within main navigation, it has to be the demo class, and you have to hover over it to get it to work. So here we would have to add a class of demo, and then, and only then would that blue hover work. Let's say that we had two competing rules, and this one we want to be purple. So in all A elements in main navigation, when we hover, it should be purple. But if it has a class of demo inside of main navigation, see how there's fewer of these classes? That means this is more specific. That's how you know this is the more specific rule. So what's going to happen? Who's going to win? Let's even, just for fun, throw this out of order. Let's put this down. Let's make it further in the cascade. If this were equal, this purple would win. Everybody would get a purple hover. But when we go to hover, academics gets the purple hover, admissions gets the blue hover. Why? Demo, this class, is by nature more specific than just a plain old A element. CSS is saying here, you're going to have tons and tons of A elements in here. I just know it. But you're not going to go through all the work of putting a class on every single one. So I'm going to assume the class is more specific. Just like if you had the ID, like we were looking at last time, the CSS is going to say, well, you're only allowed to have one of those on the page, so I'm only going to apply it in this one place, and it should probably override all other rules. Because you probably really meant it to apply here, and other rules that might conflict, well, they don't have that ID, so who cares? So again, think about naturally what's going to be used less on the page. A class is always going to be used less than an element. An ID is always going to be used less than a class. The hover state, you have to like go through and actually hover on something. So of course, that's going to be in less active use than any other selector on the page. All of these kind of combine, and these multiple levels go together to say, okay, this is going to be my specificity. So again, just try reading it out, try talking it through. How many classes are there on a page? How many IDs are there on a page? How many elements could there be on a page? It goes element, class, and then ID. Element, class, ID. If you can't remember anything else, those three will get you very far. So one other thing that we can talk about today with regards to this is some of those like child combinator selectors. So let's say that we have main navigation A, color white, and then we say direct children of A, get a color of blue. Oh, I'm surprised by that. I would have thought that the direct child selector was more specific, but let's give it a try. Dot main navigation A, specificity score 0.1.1, direct child. It's the same. So even though that's a little bit more specific, this one, the one that says only the A's underneath main navigation, directly underneath, and not the ones further down, that's pretty specific, but it's actually not more specific than just saying any A underneath. However, if you were to put in like a span here, like some sort of child element, basically if you were to introduce another level of nesting, so body, main navigation A, add an element to that. And then let's say underneath you said main navigation A and body was blue. Now this one will win. Why does it win? Because you've added a whole nother level of nesting, whole nother level of specificity. This rule will only target A elements inside of main navigation that are also inside of body. Whereas the second rule, it only looks at A elements inside of main navigation. So there could be multiple main navigations. CSS doesn't know. It doesn't know the difference. But this rule says, oh no, only the ones in body or only the ones inside of some class. You know what I mean? You see what I mean? Each extra bit you add here adds more specificity. And you can even see this in the calculator. Body, main navigation A, that's 0.1.2. Some class, main navigation A, 0.2.1. So a little bit more specific because you have an extra class in here. So that's really the basics of specificity, right? That's how you're going to determine how CSS applies in the document. And if this is confusing, that's okay. It's really important to know how specificity works in CSS because as you start writing more complicated CSS for multiple pages, you are going to get some conflicts that you can't solve by just reordering stuff on the page. You're going to need to say, okay, how specific did I get with my selector back here? Did I nest it like 3 times? Did I use an ID? What's happening? And instead of trying to override it, again, trying to get more specific, you should ask yourself when you hit that point, did I write a good generic selector that's easy to override? Where in my CSS is this rule? And how specific is my selector? Because if you're not able to override that rule, it's probably because of selector specificity. There's a whole bunch of rules. There's even a CSS flag called important that will override everything. Never use it. It's a bad idea. It will be a nightmare to override. The only way you can override it is with more importance. So just like pretend it doesn't exist. All right, so recapping our rules here. Rules for writing great CSS. Stick with classes if you don't know what else you're doing. Just stick with classes. Write a class, write hover or your pseudo selector against it if you need that. Classes should be kind of like your first stop. If you have something that is used a lot on the page and you kind of want it to be really consistent. So you want the treatment of like a link to be really consistent in your content. And you don't want to have to put classes all over your links. Go ahead and use an element selector. That's fine too. Stay away, however, from IDs unless you really know what you're doing and you know for sure the CSS has to be that specific because it's an absolute nightmare to override. So I hope this helps you understand specificity. Give it a try in your code. Try writing some different selectors, add specificity, reduce it. Try the CSS specificity calculator if you're stuck and you don't understand why something is not overriding. That will help you out a lot. And again, if you're ever in doubt, read it out. Just read out your CSS selector. It only applies here and in this situation and in this situation. Even mark down how many times you say, and only in this and only in this. And that'll give you a rough idea of the specificity there. Whatever numbers you just start marking off, that will help you figure out what's going on. So with that, I'll see you later.